What's up guys, Jeff from Sorta Healthy here. And in today's video, we'll be going over the workout chart that I use with all of my clients. This chart helps to keep me organized and it helps to keep my workouts varied and effective. We'll be going over the phasing system that I use with all of my clients as well. And we'll even dive into program design as a personal trainer a bit too. My goal with today's video is to give all of you an easy to follow guide for training your clients like a professional. Everything featured in today's video is currently being used in my personal training studio and it all works great. Every form that I go over today is free to download by going to this link in the video description. All I ask for in return for all this free stuff is you liking the video and subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. This does help the channel to grow and that does allow me to keep making free content for all of you. Thank you very much everyone, I really appreciate the support. On with the rest of the video. So we've got a lot to talk about in this one, and I think it's best to start things off by talking about phasing. What exactly is phasing? Well, phasing, at least in our context as personal trainers, is the changing of training variables on a consistent basis. NASM uses the OPT model as their phasing system, and I do have my gripes with it, but overall I think it's okay. The phasing system that I use in my business is a little bit simpler and more effective as well. At least in my opinion it is anyway. And instead of me blabbing on about it, why don't I just explain to you how it works? So here's the phasing system that we use in my studio, Commence Fitness. We've made some subtle improvements to it in 2021, so if you're using an older version of this phasing system, you might notice a few differences. So we have 5 different phases here. We have foundation, muscular endurance, hypertrophy, strength, and metabolic conditioning. Each phase has different rep ranges and a different recommendation for sets. So I could go on and on about why you'd want to phase your clients, and that's something we'll dive into a little bit more detail on later in this video, but in my mind, the main 2 reasons to phase your clients are, 1, to prevent them from plateauing. Changing up your workout variables on a regular basis can really help to prevent this. And 2, to keep your workouts a little bit more varied, which is likely to make them more enjoyable. Anyways, moving back to the chart. If I have a client coming in for weight loss, they start out in this foundation phase. Next they do muscular endurance, hence the number 2 here. Then we do hypertrophy, then we do metabolic conditioning, and then typically we do a strength phase after that. And I probably include this strength phase for 80 to 90% of my weight loss clients. There is no downside to being stronger, and it never really slows down their weight loss results either. Ultimately, I need to have a pretty good reason to not include it. If we have a client starting out with a goal of getting stronger, they would follow this path. So they would still start out in the foundational phase. I'll explain more about all these different phases in a second, by the way. And after that foundation phase, we would have them either move to a strength or a hypertrophy phase. You choose based on what you think your client would do better with. And that's why we have this little arrow right here. You then include muscular endurance and metabolic conditioning as you see fit. I basically just include phases like metabolic conditioning for a strength-based client when they're feeling a little bit burnt out or maybe their goals change a little bit and they want to focus on getting leaner. Ultimately, it comes down to your client's goals and your best judgment. And each of these other tracks follows a similar pattern. They're all pretty easy to figure out. If I were focused on getting muscle mass, I would go in this track right here, physique. If I was focused mainly on flexibility or mobility, I would go in this mobility track right here. And if I were a student athlete, I would go in this one right here. The foundation phase is pretty much where everyone should start out. Only skip that foundation phase if you have a very advanced client. The purpose of this foundation phase is to get your clients into a routine and to help them master foundational movements. What are foundational movements, you ask? Let's take a quick detour over to the workout chart to talk about that. Things like squats, deadlifts, lunges, bench press, rows, pull downs. These are all examples of foundational movements. Of course, there are more examples too. Your routine should always include these types of compound foundational movements. They have the highest carryover to activities of daily living and they're the most efficient. Back to the phasing chart. Muscular endurance is the next phase we'll discuss. The rep count is higher here. By the way, the objective for any phase is to aim for the rep range shown. Let's say I was having my client squatting and they could get 18 reps with a handful left in reserve. That would mean that that exercise was well suited for this muscular endurance phase because they got 18 reps between these 2 numbers here and they only had a few left in reserve with good form. You'll typically want to avoid going to failure with most training clients regardless of the phase. Always try and leave a few reps in reserve to help with form. Anyways, the move selection is pretty much the same with foundation and muscular endurance. We favor compound movements and only do some accessory movements. Next up, we'll talk about hypertrophy, and the rep count goes down quite a bit here. I also still favor compound moves here. Sometimes I'll include more accessory moves in this hypertrophy phase, and on those simpler accessory moves, I could bring my client closer to failure. I tend to do that more often if building extra muscle mass is more important for them, and moves like overhead tricep extensions come to mind here. Next up, we have the metabolic conditioning phase. The only thing that changes about the move selection here is that we add more conditioning exercises into the mix. I like the battle ropes, sliders, and near sprinting type movements on things like the rowing machine. Compound movements are still very prevalent in these workouts. We have a 15 plus rep count, so it's on the higher side, and we do time a lot of these movements too. For example, if I'm going to have someone do rope waves, I'm probably just going to time them for 30 seconds. Next up, we'll talk about the strength phase. In the strength phase, we focus primarily on compound movements, but now the weight is heavier and the rep counts are lower. Accessory moves are still included here, just like they would be in any phase, but they are lower priority. Now, how do you know when it's time to change phases? For example, going from 1 to 2. Well, you can either change your client's phase every 6 to 8 weeks or every 15 sessions. We used to change all of our clients' phases every 6 to 8 weeks, but we've actually found it more practical to change their phases every 15 sessions. Both ways are simple enough, but this way is even a little bit simpler, and simple is good. And now we're taking a deeper dive into the workout chart and how it works. This is the workout chart we use in my studio, and I'll be honest, it's pretty cool that people are using this thing all over the world now. I'm really glad so many people are finding it useful. We have an older video that breaks down how this chart works, and that video still holds up well. We have made some slight changes to this chart recently though, some of which we'll break down in today's video. So starting from the top, we have a session counter, and this is good for knowing how many sessions your client has completed, and it's also good for knowing when you're supposed to change phases. Right beneath that, we have the actual phase. This is this person's first session, so they're in foundation. By the way, if we scroll down to the bottom of the page, we can see this phasing table right here. This is a new addition to this chart, and it makes it easier to see what phase you should be moving to next. These charts are meant to be printed off and written on with pencil, so basically if I'm in foundation phase, I would just circle the 1 in this foundation phase here, like it says right here. We also have a notes section, and we have a weight tracker, so you can check your client's weight and record it on a regular basis to help measure their progress. All these things are here just to make your life easier as a trainer. Back up at the top now, we have the date and warm-up sections. Both of those two things are pretty self-explanatory. Moving on to the rest of the workout. Our workout today is meant to be what a beginner's workout might look like on day 1. We'll say this person has very little lifting experience, no real limitations, and they're focused on weight loss. All of this makes them a very average client. Our first move is goblet squats. That's why there is a GOB right here. I use all kinds of abbreviations like this on this whole chart. We have GOB 10, and the 10 stands for a 10-pound dumbbell. We then do 15 reps for 3 sets. So we go weight or resistance, followed by reps, followed by sets. We then have assisted split squats where we're holding on to the squat rack. BW stands for body weight, so no extra weight here. And we have 12 reps per side for 2 sets. Next up, we have 16-inch box step-ups for 12 reps and 2 sets. We also have stability ball hamstring curls, SB stands for stability ball, for 15 reps and 2 sets. And if we scroll down to the upper body section, we see the same pattern down here. We have bench press with a standard 45-pound barbell. We have overhead press with 2 10-pound dumbbells. We have dumbbell rows, and we have underhand modified TRX chin-ups for 15 reps and 2 sets. And all of those rep counts we just talked about do fit into phase 1 foundation. Of course, only leaving a few reps in reserve, and like mentioned before, most of our moves are compound moves. We actually do have a few core moves in the form of Russian twists and planks, and we also do 2 sets of 30-second rope waves as well. For average everyday beginner clients, I think it's useful to include a little extra isolation work for the core. It's true that you engage your core doing things like squats and deadlifts, but for the average deconditioned person, that probably isn't enough in the beginning. So throwing in some isolation work for the core, especially early on, is probably a good move for most clients. So if we look at the second session, we see a lot of the same things. I didn't talk too much about our warm-up on day 1, but our warm-up on day 1 was bodyweight squats and SMR self-myofascial release hamstrings. On day 2, we're focusing a little bit extra on self-myofascial release using the foam roller, and we'll be doing that on the thoracic spine and again the hamstrings. Anyways, we still have goblet squats on the second day. This time the weight is slightly heavier and we're doing 1 less set. We have Romanian deadlifts. RDL stands for Romanian deadlift, and we're using 2 12-pound dumbbells for 15 reps and 2 sets. We also have bodyweight walking lunges. We have some weighted bridges off of the ground, and going down to the upper body section, we see some bar push-ups here. The 10 stands for the height of the bar. The lower the bar, the harder the push-up. And I like this type of push-up because it's easy to make it gradually harder. We do have overhead extensions here. This is more of an accessory move, and some of those are totally fine. We have TRX modified pull-ups, basically the same thing as before, but with a pronated or overhand grip. We also have reverse flies down here with the band, aka band pull-aparts. There are a few different ways you could do this move. We have some dead bugs for 40 seconds. We have some stability ball crunches, and we also have some slow and controlled mountain climbers on the sliders. These 2 workouts are both a accomplishing a lot of the same things, but they feel different enough to keep things fun for the client. This also helps to keep you, the trainer, on task with a ton of different things as well. And if we had more time, we would see this pattern continue over the course of many different workouts. We would continuously try to keep the workouts relevant to our client's goals. We would also try and get our client as close to mastery as possible for foundational compound movements, like this one, by practicing them very often. We would also try and keep these workouts as fun and varied as possible without compromising all of that other stuff too. And that's easier said than done, but having forms like these ones can help with that. And there we have it, everyone, a phasing system and a workout chart that are both simple to use and effective. Like I mentioned before, the systems shown in today's video do help to do a few different things. 1, they help to prevent your client from plateauing. 2, they help to prevent your client from getting bored. 3, they help to prevent you, the trainer, from getting complacent or lazy. 4, they help to keep you, the trainer, organized. And 5, they help to make you, the trainer, look prepared and professional. Hopefully all of you found this video helpful, and I'll probably release a video on all these things about once a year, maybe even more often, because there's always little things to improve. My personal training studio serves as a pretty good testing facility, and we're always looking for any way to make our systems better. Anyways, if you guys do have any comments or questions, make sure to leave those down below and I will respond to them. As always, if you haven't done so already, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, because it does help the channel to grow, which does allow me to make more free content for all of you. Thanks for watching, everyone, and until next time, stay sorta healthy.